Okay, so I'm just going to give a quick review of last time, very quick because we have a lot to cover. But for those who weren't in the class, 6 constant mitzvahs is the 6 constant commandments that the Almighty put in His Torah that we try to do all the time. And you realize that when you have, say, 6, there's only 6 of them. Not to murder, as an example, is not one of the 6, although you can never murder. But you don't always have an urge to do it. So therefore, you don't always get credit for doing it. These 6 things that you're getting credit for, if you will, these opportunities to connect, is something that is constantly an opportunity for us. And it's constantly an opportunity for us because there's a constant urge not to do them. And that's what makes a constant commandment. And we realize intuitively and otherwise that if you have something that's constantly incumbent upon you, it represents something essential in the tradition. And so I would suggest to everyone that these 6 constant commandments are the essential ingredients of what we're trying to do in Judaism. And we started talking about the first of the 6 constant commandments, which is to believe in the Almighty. To believe in the Almighty. And I didn't say last time, but I'll say it now, that in the tractate in the Talmud called Makos, talks about punishments in Judaism. Very much at the end of the tractate, it says that King David, boiled down the commandments to 13. It became difficult for people to focus on 613 in the way they would need to. Of course, they had to do the commandments. In terms of what were they focusing on, he focused the Torah to 13. And other prophets came to 11 and to 9 and to 7 and to 6. And the last of the prophets boiled the Torah down to 1 commandment. And that was the righteous person will live in his belief. Belief in God. As the central focus of the entirety of Judaism, belief in God. And I believe that is true. And we embarked last time on trying to understand what is this mitzvah, what is this commandment to know the Almighty. Because it says in the Torah, this first commandment, it's the first of the 10 commandments, you shall know that I am your God who took you out of Egypt. That's what it says. And we asked last time that this seems to be a little curious. Is this commandment coming for those who believe or not believe? And I think what we all said is it's coming for believers. Those are the people who read the book. So it's coming for believers. So what's the commandment? There's different approaches, but the Rambam, Maimonides, says that it's taking belief that you have and making it knowledge. Actually know the Almighty exists. Bring it into knowledge. Make it so clear to you and integrated in your person that you act on it. Make it knowledge. Take belief and put it into knowledge. And we talked about some things. We talked about the design, proof, the evidence for this. The evidence. One of the evidences is there's design in the universe. We also talked about the fact that the Almighty gave the Torah in front of millions of people. There's a lot of different things that give us evidence when we know something. We know something based on evidence. And that was last time. And what we said right at the end of last time is the implication, and I want to start with this. The implication of knowledge, of knowing something, is we have the opportunity to act on it. We have the opportunity to act on it. We're not always mature to live out our knowledge, i.e. to live in reality. But when we have knowledge of something, it allows us gives us the capability to live with it. I'll give you a personal example. I was diagnosed over 15 years ago with diabetes. And my father passed away at 47 from diabetes, with complications of diabetes. So I know with 5-finger clarity how much of a killer this disease is, and that I don't want to be there. So I've been able to live a regime in the 15 years subsequently that's been very strict with respect to diet and exercise, because I know with 5-finger clarity. Knowledge can lead you to act. When we have a business deal and we know that if I do this, I do that, I'm very real with certain things because I know the consequences. I know what it's about. If there's a problem with one of my children, I know it's a priority and I can act on it. So too, we want to take those things which we know and act on. And knowledge of the Almighty is one of the major things in life that we want to become more connected to, have greater awareness with. So that was last time's class. And I will tell you, to have this awareness, to plug in more with the reality that the Almighty exists and bring it into our lives is not so easy. It's not so easy. I always talk about an amusement park. And we all know, if you've been to Great Adventure, what's the first thing you hit before you get to the really big rides in the back, where it's all the roller coasters, all the really fun stuff you came for? What do you hit in the first little bit of the section of the amusement park? You hit all these games where you throw a basketball and you throw this and you win dolls and you win, right? And when you go with kids to that amusement park, they get very distracted and they want to go to every one of those booths. And you realize that what they really missed is that the real opportunity of the amusement park is behind them. It's all those great rides. But the beginning is very distracting. And I will suggest to you that that's life as well. Life can be very distracting. And if we want to get through life and get to the amusement park, which is behind us, we have to keep our eye on the ball. We have to keep our eye on the ball. So what we're doing is getting a clarity together about what is the awarenesses we should have now with this idea of belief in the Almighty. We're going to make it hopefully grounded this session. So I will say one approach to try to live with this concept, to live with the concept that the Almighty is really here, came from Rabbi Yitzhak Berkowitz, one of my rabbis in Israel. And he said the following. He said, when you look at the actual commandment in Torah, it teaches you four things: that God created the world, sustains the world, orchestrates the world, sustainer, creator, sustainer, there's a different way of saying it, but sustainer and orchestrator of the world. And then the fourth thing he says, it also says that you should be awaiting the Messiah. Funny connection. The other three come from one's understanding of God. He's a sustainer, creator, and supervisor. That was the word. Creator, sustainer, supervisor. The fact of waiting for a Messiah comes from the following perspective, that there must be a purpose for that which is created. You don't just create, if you're God, intelligent being, for no reason. You created something now to fulfill a purpose. And so therefore, Rabbi Berkowitz suggests that purpose is what can thread all of those awarenesses, that the Almighty created the world, and that he sustains the world, and that he supervises the world. So one way, perhaps, to look at actualizing this commandment is to live with your purpose. To live with your purpose. And Rabbi Berkowitz suggests that if one would live with their purpose, that would be the way to have a real outcome to your belief in the Almighty. Right? We all know we have a boss. I have a CEO. And if I'm living in reality, I'm doing what my CEO wants me to do. Right? I'm fulfilling the purposes of my job, which is related to my CEO and the relationship we have. Now, it's just not that I have a relationship, I have a whole bunch of things with my CEO. But one can see that if I'm living with my purpose, I'm also actualizing a big part of the relationship, and in this case, with the Almighty. Okay? So that's one approach to this idea. How do I take living with God and make it real? According to Rabbi Berkowitz, live with your purpose. Now, without spending time on purpose too much, we've talked about it before, but I do want to say that the world the Almighty created for us is to have pleasure. And pleasure comes in a lot of varieties. There's physical pleasure and there's spiritual pleasure. So while we're supposed to have physical pleasure, I'm supposed to drink this cup of coffee and I'm supposed to get energized and exercise and go on vacations when I need it. The purpose of life is not the physical pleasure, but rather the better, more vibrant pleasures, more fulfilling pleasures are spiritual pleasures. I want to love. I want to give. I want to make a difference. And one way we do that is by emulating the characteristics of the Almighty. Right? So one can see in general terms, I want to have a meaningful life or I'm a giver. Now, without going into more about what the purpose of life is, that's a good way of thinking about it. I want to be a giver. I want to make an impact. I want to do that which is meaningful. And a lot of that is wrapped up in emulating the character traits of the Almighty. So Rabbi Berkowitz would say, focus on your purpose, clarify your purpose, and you go a long way to living with the Almighty in your life. I want to go in this class and focus on a different way to be real with living with the Almighty, and that's trust in the Almighty. A great rabbi called the Chazon Ish said that the essence of belief is to live with it. The actualization of belief is you're living with the Almighty, and that's trusting Him. It's analogous to this. We mentioned it last time, but as I said, let's say you're a tightrope walker, and you got to get to very important to cross the road away. There's a rope, and you got to get to that side. There's a very important purpose that you have. You want to know that there's a net below you, right? If you knew there was a net below, you'd undertake walking across the tightrope quite easily. If you didn't know and you were unsure about it, you'd be a bit squeamish to undertake your mission. So we want to have a trust in the Almighty such that we live with the knowledge that the Almighty is behind us, and we go and do things based upon that knowledge. It's very empowering. You can walk across that tightrope. And that's what our class is going to focus on. How do we build trust in the relationship with the Almighty? Okay? I'm going to talk about 7 steps to trust. There's a book called Obligations of the Heart, Duties of the Heart, by Rabbi Bachaya, a classic in Jewish thought. Duties of the Heart. And in Duties of the Heart, it mentions 7 steps that you have to go through to really have integrated knowledge and trust of the Almighty. So the first step is you have to know the Almighty loves you. You have to know He loves you like a father. He loves you and wants to shower you with all that's good. And the more we appreciate that the Almighty wants to love us and give to us, says Rabbi Bechaya in Duties of the Heart, the more we can trust Him, like with parents. And I always think of the analogy of being on a handlebars on a gym set outside and needing to come down, and your father or mother say, just go, I'll catch you. And you don't have the hesitation because really when they don't think it through, but the parents have demonstrated love and being there for their children for so much time that you trust that when the parents say something, that they'll be there for you. So too the Almighty, when we peel back the onion and think about all the things in our lives that the Almighty has showered on us, the blessings He gives us, then we come to trust Him. Okay, now we have to do a little bit of work on this because as my Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Weinberg, would say, being happy and appreciating what you have takes work. It takes work. It takes work because a lot of us, when we drink this cup of coffee, unless we savor the aroma and feel how hot it goes down and wakes me up, and I take pleasure in that cup of coffee, I'm just chemicals going down. So the price tag, the effort involved in pleasure, even physical pleasure, is awareness. We have to tune in. We have to plug in. And so, too, even the more important pleasures that we have that perhaps we take for granted. Give you an example of this. My Rosh Yeshiva would said this example. You got a guy in the Empire State Building. If you heard this before, I'm sorry. But you got a guy in the Empire State Building, and you see he's on the ledge. You see he's on the ledge. And you got to talk him down because you can't let him go. And he says to you his terrible life story. It's a terrible life story. You want to jump. It's so bad. Terrible life story. You think to yourself, what can you say to this guy? And you say to him, look, I know you've had a very terrible life. But in addition to all the difficulties you've had in life, let's say you were blind. And let's say I could give you back your sight. Would you stick around for a week or would you jump? And the person says, I'd stick around for you for a week. You say to him, you have your eyes. You have that which you'd stick around for a week. You just don't appreciate them. And that's all of us. All of us don't fully appreciate all the gifts and the talents and the attributes that we have. We have one eye, we have two eyes, right? But you couldn't buy an eye for trillions of dollars that works and functions, and we have two eyes. We have intelligence. We were brought up in America. We have parents that loved us. We're Jewish. We have all kinds of physical capability, all kinds, and yet we don't fully appreciate it. It's a struggle. And why is that? Rabbi Bachaya also says in the book, Duties of the Heart, he says, it's like this. The analogy he brings is like this. You know why it's so difficult? Like this. Let's say we see a situation where a child, a little infant was stolen by marauders. The family was taken. They killed, unfortunately, the parents. The little 2-year-old is there. Hadn't done anything about it. With him, they try to ransom him for money. A wealthy benefactor comes and pays the fee, takes the little 2-year-old, raises the child, the son, as his own throughout all of his years, schools him, feeds him, part of the family, educates him, gets him a trade, and gets him married. That's one child. And now he's 25 years old. At 19, they're both 19 years old, this wealthy benefactor sees another prisoner of marauders, happens to be a 19-year-old. And he has mercy for him. He also gives the fee to get him back. He ends up finishing out his school, teaching him a trade, and getting him married. So if I asked you, who has more appreciation for this person, well, who would you say? The little child of 2, who now is 26, or the 19-year-old, who is now 26? So I'm going to offer that the 19-year-old who's now 26 has far more appreciation. And that's because he had the emotional capacity, the maturity, the understanding to realize how big of a gift he was given. How big of a gift he's given. But the 2-year-old was given this much more gifts. He was given much more time of tremendous charity and compassion from this benefactor. But he didn't have at the time the tools to fully appreciate it. He didn't have the tools when he was 2 and 3 and 5 and 7 and 9 and 10. And we could all appreciate that we as adults, when we get older and get married, we tend and go on in life, we tend to have far more appreciation for our parents because we have more of the capability to see how much they did for us. So that's all of us. We have to appreciate the Almighty. So the tool to see how much the Almighty loves us is appreciation. We have to work on it in every part of our lives because it's a muscle. If you appreciate the people in your lives, the waitress that comes over to you and gives you things that you need, the delivery boy, your secretary, whomever, you build a muscle of appreciation. And you start to not take for granted the things you have in your life, and particularly those that come from the Almighty. So the first step in having trust in the Almighty is you have to know the Almighty loves you. Okay? Great. You know, and it's funny, and wow, it's such a true thing. My Rosh Yeshiva would say, Rabbi Weinberg, he would ask people, did you ever pray? And these were mostly not religious people. Did you ever pray? And he tells me, and I've heard it also, that 4 or 5 said yes, and 4 or 5 said that the Almighty answered their prayers. And they weren't particularly religious people. So the Almighty says, Rabbi Weinberg said that it tells you something very powerful. It tells you that intuitively we believe the Almighty loves us. We really believe that there's a Father in heaven who loves us, because that's why we're asking, and that's why we feel he answers our prayers. We really think he's going to be like that Father who does what we need, even if we don't deserve it, even if we don't listen to him, because he loves us so much. And that's the departure point. That's the first step in having trust in the Almighty. Now, you might say to yourself, well, wait a minute, I know the Almighty loves me. But you know what? He doesn't know what I'm going through. He's not connected to my life. He has a lot of big things to take care of in this world. You know, the CEO doesn't know what the clerk in the back office of his company is doing. So just like that relationship, he's not connected to what I need. He's not involved in my life. He has bigger things to take care of. Okay? So classically, Judaism says not like that. The Almighty has infinite capability to take care of everybody. And in reality, he knows every single thing that everybody needs, wants, desires. And he's constantly aware of all of those things. He's constantly aware of all of those things. Now, it's a little harder to pinpoint that in your lives and have a great degree of trust in that. So we have to kind of work on that. So one of the ways that you work on it is you think through, when have you seen that orchestration of the Almighty in your life? And when you start to tune in, by the way, you'll see it. It's kind of like radio stations. If you're not tuned in, the waves are out there. But if you don't tune into the right station, you miss it. If you know what you're looking for, you have a great ability to hit it. So I want to give you an example of this, where I can say very clearly in my life, I saw that. I saw the Almighty, knew exactly what I needed, exactly where I was, and was giving me a personal message. 2 years ago in the summer, I happened to be in line for, I told this story a lot, but it's a great story for that. 2 years ago, I happened to be in the summer in the city, very, very hot. I usually go with a jacket. I took it off, and I had my pass to get into my office on my belt with my picture and my name. Picture, name, company on my belt. Jacket off so someone can see it. The guy in front of me looked down at me and he said, "Are you Mitch Barnett?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, you might want to know why I know." He looked at my past, but he said like this, "I was in my office 20 minutes ago, and I'm an analyst. I'm looking to make an investment in a company called Excel Brands, a public brand company. And I wanted to look at the loan documentation to see if there are anything that I should be worried about as an investor." So I scrolled down in the documentation, and I saw the banker who signed this loan agreement. His name was Mitch Barnett. And I was thinking to myself, how am I going to find this guy? How am I going to find Mitch Barnett? And then 20 minutes later, he's standing in front of me in a restaurant in the city, and he identifies me through my badge. The Almighty wrapped a bow around a message to Mitch Barnett and this other fellow who happened to be religious. "Hello, I'm here, and I made your match." Not because he needed that to be his message, the way it goes, but he wanted me to know for sure I'm in your life. And when we tune in to times when we see those kinds of things in our lives, we build up that muscle, that second step, which is having a confidence that the Almighty knows every single thing you need. So the first step, again, is the Almighty loves you. He loves you more than you love yourself. He loves you with a love that's greater than all the love in the world. Second step is he knows everything about you. He's constantly connected to you. He knows what you need. He knows what you want to need. Third step is the Almighty has all the power. He has everything. Anything you want from the Almighty, he could give you. Good health, to be a genius. Anything you want. Anything you need. To cure a sick child, God forbid. To help you in a difficult situation. He has all the power. And the interesting thing is, again, when we look at the model of our family, our father, let's say. You come to your father with a reasonable request. You ask him for a dime. Right? You ask him something he can clearly afford. And it's a reasonable request. You're sure the Almighty is going to give it to you. Your father's going to give it to you. You're sure. Because he loves me. He knows what I need. It's a reasonable request. And he can afford it. You'd be outraged if he didn't give it to you. The Almighty is like your father, except nothing diminishes him. Your father has a little less money, a couple nickels, a couple dimes, a couple quarters, $100 less. The Almighty could give you billions of dollars. It doesn't matter. It's not irrelevant. It doesn't diminish his power. He has everything that is at his disposal to give you what you need. Well, the first three steps, again, the awarenesses you have to have. You have to know the Almighty loves you. And it's a constant work at really feeling the Almighty loves you. It's something we try to do every single day. And we'll get to tools when we're done with the overview of how to do this. So you got to know the Almighty loves you. You got to also know that he knows exactly what you need. And you have to know that he has all the power. Now that's pretty empowering, because if you know he loves you, and he knows what you need, knows where you are, knows where you're headed, and he has all the means to help you. That's empowering. I remember when I was started at Bankers Trust in 1983. There was a guy that worked with me called Scott Greenberg, still a friend of Scott Greenberg's. And his father was the chairman of AIG, right? Maurice Greenberg. Hugely wealthy person, very well connected in business. And I had lost my father when I was 18, and now I was 22. Got to know Scott when I was 23, 24. He had a confidence. He walked differently than I did. He had the capacity to make things happen a different way. He could call someone and have 20 contacts. He just had a different level of confidence to undertake than I did. It was clear to me. And that's my example on my grounded level as to what it's like relying on the Almighty. He loves me. He knows what I need, and he has all the resources, much more than Hank Greenberg, Maurice Greenberg, much more than Warren Buffett, if he was your father, mentor, much more than anybody you could hold up. That's an empowering version of the Almighty. And that's what we want to walk with. That's what we want to build within us. So the first step, he loves you. The second step, he knows everything about you. And the third step is he has all the power. Now, what might hold you back? This is a very important one. What might even hold you back? Because those three things are over the top. So I'll suggest to you that even though we know that the Almighty has all the power, we live and think as if we have all the power. And let me try to make that clear to us. The first thing you might not appreciate fully, but I want to say it out and then we'll work it through. And that is, Rabbi Weinberg would say that you couldn't raise a hand without the Almighty. He said this, he explained it like this. Explain to me how you raise your hand. How does it work? What do you do? Explain what goes on. Even the scientists can't really explain it. There's things that explain the function, but how it works, it's a total miracle. And classic Judaism says that everything in this world is sustained by the Almighty. It doesn't go. Nothing goes without the Almighty, number one. Classic Judaism, number one. But number two, he gives us these skills and gifts for us. We're the ones that think through a problem and provide an answer in class. We're the ones that put together that creative deal in business and close it. We're the ones who parent our kids. We're the ones that do things. So my Rosh Hashiva and Judaism would suggest to us, while that's true, and we have to make the effort, everything we get is a gift. Everything we get is a gift. It's not by virtue of our efforts that we succeed. It's by virtue of the gift that the Almighty allows us to succeed. And that's something you have to work with in your mind. But I want to tell you what the power of that is, and both how it holds you back, but how it empowers you. And it goes as follows. If I want to change, I'll look at personal development as one issue. If I want to change, if I want to become a more disciplined person, I want to keep to regimes, I want to have better time management, something I need to work on, and I've struggled with for a long time. Can I change completely? Do I really feel I can change completely? And I'll tell you that no. I failed at it for 40 years. I could do 10% better. I could do 20% better. But come on, I know who I am. There's things I can do, and there's things I can't do. And we all have I cans and I can'ts in life. But that comes from a perspective that I do everything because I know I'm responsible for that. I take credit for that accomplishment. So I know I only can do a little bit more. But if I truly believe that the Almighty can literally, he does everything and he can give me it as a gift, then there's nothing I really can't do. There's no I can'ts. There's nothing I really can't do. There's no I can'ts. I can do anything because I ascribe all of my accomplishments to the Almighty. So realize, again, work with that concept. It's not easy to work on that track because we're moving and shaking in this world, right? My friend Steve Sokol is cutting that deal with lawyers. Lloyd DeSatnik is making that lease. We're all doing it. We're all doing it. But we have to know that the Almighty is really giving us blessing. We're undertaking, and the Almighty is getting it done. Okay? Very important point. And I want to put that together because that now opens up a different world that helps reinforce what we said before. Number one, you have to know the Almighty loves you. Number two, you have to know that he's constantly in touch with you. Number three, you got to know that he has all the power, all the resources. It doesn't diminish him in the least, giving you anything. And fourth, you got to know that you're not responsible for your accomplishments. You're not responsible for all the things that really go in your life. It's all a gift from the Almighty. So now if you think through that, you've got a lot more to be thankful for. It all comes back to gratitude. So I want to give you a couple of examples of this. I remember it to this day. I heard this class, and I was thinking about this class about that the Almighty gets things done for you, and there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and there's tremendous orchestration in your life. And I was trying to say, is that true? Does that make sense in terms of my experiences? So I remember something I was particularly proud of. is when I was 16, the summer year of my 16th year, my friend who happens to be on the line got a job as a tennis counselor with my twin brother, Simcha, and they went off to a camp and had a great time for the summer. Now, I played tournaments, tournament tennis, and that year, the last year of my 16-year and unders, was the year to put into colleges to really get into colleges. So it was my ranking year that really was important to get to a place where I wanted to in college. And I didn't have a great year that second year of the 16s. And if I got ranked at all, it would have been like below top 50, 49, 50, 48. I wasn't, near the middle of the pack. I wasn't anywhere. My brother, on the other hand, was in the middle of the pack. And he felt that was going to get him where he needed to go, and he went off to summer camp. So I told my parents, I'm doing this, and I'm training, and I'm going to make the summer circuit, and I'm going to make it happen. Win, lose, or draw. And that's what I did. And I remember that I'd never gone to a finals in a tournament in my life. But the first tournament was outdoor Albany at Albany State University. And I drew the number 1 seed. For all of you know tennis, right? Number 1 seed, the best. He's supposed to win. His name was Nevin Danziger. I remember him to this day. He was a nationally ranked player in the 14 and unders. He was playing up. Okay? So here, I faced the first seed in the tournament, first round. And I beat him handily. And I went on to lose in the finals of that tournament. The next tournament, I also went to the finals. I was seeded second, and I beat the guy I lost to in the first tournament, although I lost in that second tournament. And it was a happy ending to my story. I was ranked 25 in the East, went to college, and the rest is history. When I thought back on that whole thing, which is me, who did it? I trained, I showed up, I played. I thought to myself, in retrospect, 1 second, when I played this guy, Nevin Danziger, did he have a good day? I don't think so. I don't think so. He wasn't playing that well. Did all the things that happened to me in that tournament, was that my doing? No. I showed up, no question about it. And I had to put in the time. You got it. But you know what? There's a lot of orchestration going on around these events in our lives that have absolutely nothing to do with you. He had a bad day. Okay, I had to respond and also not have a bad day. True. But I didn't beat him handily because I was that better. I was better than him. I wasn't. There's orchestration going on. I remember when I was fundraising, after becoming religious, I was fundraising, and I couldn't get on the phone with a guy for a year. And I called him every month, and I called him every 3 months, and finally, it was a former client. And a year later, he picks up the phone as if he just spoke with me the next day and he was my best friend. And I was like scratching my head like, what? But you know what? The Almighty put him on the phone in a year's time. The Almighty gave that opening. The Almighty has a whole orchestration with us. Now, again, we have to tune in to the knob. We have to tune into the station to really see that there's a lot going on in the background. But when we see all the things that the Almighty has done to get us where we're going in life. I got into Judaism because my brother convinced me to go on a trip when I was 27 years old around the world. Crazy. But he did. He convinced me. And he said, why did you ask for a leave of absence? I had a job. He didn't have a job. So I said, okay, I will. Got a leave of absence. How bizarre is that? 6 months, leave of absence, got my job, went traveling with my brother around the world, somehow got to Israel. Somehow I found a program called Discovery. Somehow I took it. I didn't blow it off, which I was thinking of doing, to go to the beaches of Tel Aviv. Somehow, and all the orchestrations of our lives, when we think it through, they're the loving guidance of the Almighty. So I'll suggest to all of us that the Almighty loves us. He knows everything we need. He has all the power, and we don't have the power. When we start approaching our lives that way, and we start seeing how much the Almighty is interacting with us, it even builds more love and gratitude and more trust. Okay? So those are the first 4 steps. I'm going to pause and ask anyone if they have any questions before we finish the last 3, and then some practical tips. Great. Everyone's good. So am I. So let's go further. So the next point, it's an amazing point. It's just an amazing point. Think about this. Let's say something you really want. I remember when I was in yeshiva, again, struggling with these ideas, embracing these ideas. I had learned for 3 years, and I now felt it was time, once I figured out where I was going, to try to get married. I was a picky guy. I never really, had long-term relationships before becoming religious. And in my mind, is this ever really going to happen? Am I really going to find the right person? So for me, that was a big thing. That was one of the biggies. When I started praying for it, I started to put it in the following context. And that context is, whatever you're asking the Almighty for now is nothing compared to what He's already given you. Whatever you're asking for the Almighty now is nothing compared to what He's already given you, and I'd add for free. So think about it. He gave you your talents, your skills, your intelligence, your family, your background, your upbringings. He orchestrated everything for you on a silver platter. He has all the power, and He's not going to give you this. He's not going to give you that. He's not going to help you with this job. He's not going to help you with your children. He's not going to give you those things. He gave you ultimate gifts that are beyond description for free. And He's not going to give you these other things? Of course He will. And it brings in a very powerful idea that when you live with these steps, the Almighty loves you, He knows everything about you, He has all the power and can give you anything you need, and everything is not because of your accomplishments, but are gifts from the Almighty, then you realize that there's nothing He's going to give you anything else. It's small in comparison to all these things. It's small. And it brings the following perspective, I think, on life. You need to start expecting that the Almighty will deliver. You start expecting that the Almighty will deliver. Just like you expect your parents to be there when you fall from the monkey bars into their hands. You know they're going to be there. You know they're going to be there. Tremendous outlook, a positive outlook that gets you through your days and your accomplishments and your challenges. And we'll get to that. We'll get to that with the last two. Okay? So again, the Almighty loves you. He knows everything about you. He has all the power. You don't have the power. And anything you want is nothing compared to what He's already given you for free. The last two steps sixth is, there's no strings attached to the Almighty's giving. Don't think that He needs us to pay attention to Him. Don't think He needs us to fix up this world. Don't think He needs us to keep the Torah. Don't think He needs us to keep kosher. It's all a gift for us. It's all for our pleasure. It's all for us. His giving to us has nothing to do with our accomplishments, listening to Him and not listening to Him. It's irrelevant. There's no strings attached to the Almighty's giving. Unconditional giving. So we might think, wait a minute, I'm not paying attention. I'm not doing what I should be doing. I'm not doing everything I should be doing. I'm not living up to the expectations. Doesn't matter. Irrelevant. You know as well as I that your parents, whether you're listening to them or not, if you need something and you go to them and you're sincere, they want to give it to you. If they have it in their power to give it to you and they don't think it will hurt you, they will give it to you. And that's the expectation. So not only does you have to know the Almighty loves you, and He knows everything about you, and He has all the power, and you don't have the power, and anything you want now is nothing compared to what He already gave you, but as well, there's no strings attached. Everything the Almighty gives you and your parents give you is fully a gift. Expect it. You expect it to happen. It's going to happen. That builds tremendous trust. And here's the kicker, which is what maybe troubles most of us. The last point is, life doesn't always seem to go so well. We have challenges. We have sicknesses. We have setbacks. It doesn't look like my Father in heaven is always giving me what I want. And He doesn't seem to always be giving me what I need. And He doesn't always give the Jewish people what they need. And there's bad things that happen to good people. And there's good things that happen to bad people.
Yep.
And we can't always make sense of it. And so it diminishes, it undercuts this feeling of trust in the Almighty, that he's with us, he's behind us, he's going to give. So my friends, from that point of view, we have to understand, like parents, our kids don't always understand everything we say to them. When we tell them no, when we take them to get their shots and they're crying, don't give me those shots, don't give me those inoculations, when we don't let them take the car when we think it's not in their best interest, when we don't do things for them, and they're not mature to realize that it's coming for their interests, they have a complaint against us. As they get older, as they understand, as they become parents, they realize that you're not going to give your son and daughter everything if it's bad for them. And so too, the Almighty is not going to give us things that are bad for us. And just like we come to appreciate that our parents know what we need, God willing, they're good parents, and they know what we need, we know for sure the Almighty knows what we need and gives us exactly what we need. Now that's work. We have to work on that perspective. We don't always see it going through it. We don't always appreciate it. Life can be painful. We have to deal with that. But we often can see in retrospect that things we go through, things we have to go through that are negative, actually turned out to be positive. They actually led to growth and accomplishment. We won't always figure out things, but we have to struggle with that last piece. I want to give you a personal story. I went over to Bank of Poland from HSBC 8 years ago. My 8-year anniversary was June 1st. Amazing, 8 years. So I had a great run for 4 years, amazing run. I was asked to start a group. I hired a guy to start a group. And then things went totally south. My boss took away that guy. I lost another person. And before you know it, these 2 divisions I was running were in shambles. And it really took me years to get out of it. When I started to get out of it, though, and halfway up, 1 year in, I started to put together the group, the new group I developed. And I started looking for people, and I was close to getting people, and I was going to get that thing back going. My boss calls me into his office after that terribly difficult half year and says to me, well, you know, I just hired back the guy who used to work for you, and I want him to be a division head, like right next to you. And I like the guy. So I said, that's great. I'm happy you did that. So he said, well, the only thing is I have to give him your division because he wouldn't come unless you get the division. So I moved over. This guy came in who I hired and I mentored. It was crushing. And it really took 2 years for me to get out of that hole. And thank God I worked hard. I got out of that hole. But, you know, when I think about what that was like, number one, I had worked with these concepts. So the first thing you should know, if you believe intellectually that it's true, you have an ability to reframe. And I remember the conversation. Within 30 seconds, I reframed and I said, the Almighty is doing this for a reason. I don't know what it is right now, but I know it's for my good. And it allowed me to talk with my boss differently. Because I was shocked and I was hurt. I was a whole bunch of things. So number one, to be plugged into this reality allows you to deal with the difficulty in a mature way with your lens open in a positive way. I was able to deal with that very difficult issue in a positive way. And then it helped me have the strength, frankly, to focus on, okay, what do I have to get done? What is the Almighty saying to me? Where do I have to grow? Where do I have to become different? And I think I got some of that. I'm not sure I got all of it, but I think in the 2 years I've grown professionally and personally and picked up a lot. And I don't think I would have gotten that growth and development without this setback. So that's just an example in my life. This is one of the hardest things to come to grips with. But I think if we understand it and come to grips with it, we become capable of diminishing that which erodes our trust in the Almighty. Because the reality is, the Almighty created us. He loves us more than we love ourselves. There's no question about it. He knows everything about you. He can give you anything, anything. Imagine your father who had anything in a particular area in business, let's say. You asked him for $100. You'd be shocked if he didn't give it to you. Same thing with the Almighty. And everything you're asking for is nothing compared to what he has already given you. And there's no strings attached. See, with parents, there sometimes is strings attached. With the Almighty, no strings attached. And you know what? I know, and I trust the Almighty is doing things for my growth. I've seen so much that everything is a gift and everything is through love. We have that perspective. It's very empowering. Now, I want to say that again, this commandment is for believers, right? We're all believers on all different levels. I want to suggest to you that everybody, the great rabbis in Jerusalem and us, we're all growing in this understanding. We're all making this real for ourselves. We're all becoming people that trust in the Almighty. And if you take the steps to work these things out, one by one, you also develop over time that trust. So what's the end result of that trust? I want to say what the end result of it looks like, and then steps, very concrete steps that I think we can focus on. The end result of trusting in the Almighty is extraordinarily empowering. It means, like what my friend Scott Greenberg had, sky's the limit in terms of what I can accomplish, because everything's a gift. He'll get me there. He will help me. He will make everything happen. I can undertake. And so it's tremendously empowering, number one. Number two, it also opens you up to responsibilities, because now once you know there's no I can't, I can get it done. The Almighty loves me. I can undertake. I want to undertake. I want to make a mark in this world. I want to do things which are meaningful. You have a responsibility. We all know, because we've all taken responsibility, whether it's in our jobs, whether it's in our community, our family. We all know taking the responsibility is actually pleasurable. It takes effort, but you put yourself in a situation to get something done, it's incredibly pleasurable. And life is about taking responsibility. Life is about doing what you're meant to be doing, which is gaining meaning in this world. And if you have this perspective and trust the Almighty, sky's the limit. And so we want to set our heights, or our sights, not our heights, our sights on where we're going, how we're getting there. We're getting there by believing the Almighty. We're going to try to actualize and undertake more in our lives because we have this trust. So let's get practical. And I'm going to end with this. Now, whether you pray every day, whether you think about the Almighty, however you do it, I'm going to use that as the optimal time to try to get some of this stuff in your bones. So I'll suggest to all of you the following. That everybody should take, whether it's 15 minutes, a half an hour, whatever works for you, and put a gratitude journal together. Open up paper, take a piece of paper, and write down every single thing you're thankful for. Everything you're thankful for in life. Write it down. Get it on paper. And you want to circle what you're thankful to the Almighty for, what He's responsible for, circle that. Get it down on paper. And then every day for 2 weeks, we're doing another class in 2 weeks. Every day in the morning, if you say blessings in the morning in davening, right? I'm not a genius. The rabbis say you start off davening, praying to the Almighty, talking to Him by thanking Him for the blessings you have. So when you say those thank yous, look at your list, thank the Almighty for all the things He gave you, and try to put down one extra thing that you're thankful for. It could be then, it could be later in the day. Add something, because every day we're thankful for something. So the first thing is practice gratitude. Practice gratitude. Build the muscle of the Almighty loves you. If you don't like the gratitude journal because it's too much, my daughter, I told her to do this. She looked at me like I was from Mars. So fine, don't do that. But when you're praying, when you go over that list, thank the Almighty with sincerity for all those wonderful things He's given you. And if you don't pray, in the morning at whatever time you want, have a little session with yourself, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 1 minute, of thanking the Almighty for all that He gives you. Number one thing to do. The second thing to do is you want to make the relationship with the Almighty real. And you want to make real the fact that He's the one who gives you the blessing in life to accomplish. It's not your efforts. It's the Almighty blessing your undertakings. So I would suggest, ask the Almighty to help you with one thing. So I'm giving you prescriptions. First, thank the Almighty in your way. Second, ask the Almighty for help doing something. So I'll give you an example. Again, I undertook a process and I want to get up at a certain time, very early. I've had trouble doing it consistently. Now it's me doing it consistently. I know I'm the failure. I'm not going to do it every day. I'll do it 4 days, 3 days, 5 days, irregular. But 1 second, the Almighty can do anything He wants. So I really believe that. And I said, Almighty, can you help me? Please help me get up. Please help me keep to this regimen. Please help me keep to this schedule. So that's what I asked the Almighty for. I changed my whole rap. In davening, please, Almighty, help me do this. It's no longer that this is what I'm trying to do. Help me, Almighty, do something. That'll actualize this in real terms, that you believe that the Almighty does it. He comes through. It's a gift. Pick one thing you're going to ask the Almighty to help you with. And then lastly, and this is the wrap up, when you pray, and again, whether you pray the actual liturgy or your own words, when I'm describing to you the trust that comes from having a trust in the Almighty, is an expectation that He's going to deliver, a certainty that He's going to deliver. So when you're praying, feel that He is going to deliver, and whatever you want, whether it's that job that you need, help with your kids, help with that deal, whatever it is, realize when you're asking the Almighty to help you with it, that He's given you so much more. That's nothing. Those hard things that you need, ask, and ask in a perspective that it's in the bag, and I know you could give it to me because you've given me so much. That's my practical take on how you exercise these muscles. You actually have gratitude, and you focus on how much the Almighty has given to you, and you try to do it consistently each day. You focus on what the Almighty, you ask the Almighty to help you with something because you realize that is what's happening, and you make that real. And then you ask with a bit of certainty that what you're struggling with, He'll come through with. And the last thing, in your day, not in prayers, saying thank God during the day is very powerful for two reasons. One, if you get in the habit of saying thank God when you have a cup of coffee, thank God when things are pleasurable, you'll note the pleasure, and you'll thank the person giving you the pleasure, and you'll thank the Almighty. So you bring this idea of gratitude and love into your day, day to day. The second thing you should do is when someone says, that was a great presentation, you said, thank God. How do you feel today? Thank God. I feel good. Thank God. That's a great deal you did. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank God. Because you're talking to yourself. You're not talking to the other person. You're talking to yourself. You realize where your accomplishments come from. So it's very powerful in the day to use thank God, both to appreciate what you have and thank the Almighty, and thank God to ascribe to Him your accomplishments. Okay? So I'm done. I'm going to stop the recording. You know what? I'm going to ask, if anybody have questions, I can take them now. I'm happy to take any questions that you might have. Yeah? Nobody? Hellos, goodbyes. Love you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me, Mitch?
I can, Steve.
Okay. I do have to run. I just picked up a call here. I got to take it. But I think next time, if we could, we obviously talked about very, I think, uplifting, positive scenarios. But what happens in the circumstances and the situations where something good really hasn't happened? And how do you deal with that? You're not saying thank God in those moments. I don't think you are. So that distinction would be helpful next time. Obviously, it was very tough to cover that in this hour. But how do you dial in off of those things?
Sure, it's a great question.
You know, so
yep.
But I do have to go. I saw some of my old friends there, and everyone's doing well. And Lloyd, great to see you, buddy.
Always good to see you, bud.
Rabbi Trop, great to see you as well. I've got to run. Love to all.
Bye-bye.
Well, Steve. Mitch, good job, buddy, as always.
Thank you.